Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my November mid-month wrap-up. So today is the 16th of November, so the time has come for me to wrap up all of the books that I read in the first half of the month, so from the 1st through the 15th. And I'm really happy with my reading month so far because I completed 13 books in the first half of November, and I am, as I mentioned, filming this on the 16th, and I've already finished another book today, so it's definitely shaping up to be a much better reading month than the last couple of months. But let's jump straight in and talk about all 13 books that I've managed to complete so far this month. So the first book that I completed in the month of November was A Dog's Journey by W. Bruce Cameron. This is the sequel to A Dog's Purpose, and it just kind of goes through some further lives of a dog. If you didn't know, if you haven't read the first book, it is told from the perspective of the dog. So you are the dog kind of going through these different lives, like each time one of the dog's lives comes to an end, it is kind of reincarnated into a new dog, and then you follow that life, so on and so forth. I didn't enjoy this one quite as much as book one, but I did still really love this. It is so heartwarming, and I probably read this at a really good time because I had just come home from house sitting for my parents, and, well, dog sitting really, and looking after their puppy, and I just miss her and love her so much. I mean, I see her all the time. My parents live literally around the corner from me, so I see the dog all the time, but it also made me really miss my childhood dog. I mentioned that with the first one, and it is just so heartwarming, and it just really makes you think about dogs and how all they want to do is love humans, and it's just so beautiful and so heartwarming. I definitely recommend these two books. The next book that I completed I listened to on audio, and that is Say Yes to the Marquess by Tessa Dare. This is the second book in the Castles Ever After series, so it's the sequel to Romancing the Duke, which I read last month. This is just another historical romance. It is just basically straight romance, and this one, I didn't probably enjoy this one quite as much as book one, but I did still really enjoy it. These are just really like fun, sexy, historical kind of romances, and I was really enjoying it, and I gave this one 3.75 stars, and again, this one is narrated by Carmen Rose. Next, I read Saga Volume 7 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This one was okay. I definitely feel, I think the first 5 volumes I gave all 5 stars, and then I think I gave the last one 4 stars, and I've only given this one 3.5 stars. I am still enjoying it, but like with this one, I didn't feel like that much happened. I still really love the characters, but it didn't feel like a lot happened, and the ending was really sad, and I just feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm hoping that it's going to start to kind of wrap up. I know that there's a volume 8. Obviously, I don't know if it's continuing past that. I kind of hope it finishes with volume 8 or volume 9. Like, I just don't want it to be one of those series that started out really strong and then just goes on for a really long time and really should have just ended. You know how they do that on the TV series. So I'm hoping that it's going to end soon, but I did still enjoy it, but it's definitely not as strong as the first few volumes, and I gave this one 3.5 stars, as I mentioned. Next, on audio, I listened to When a Scot Ties the Knot by Tessa Dare. This is the 3rd book in the series, and again, I really enjoyed this one. This was probably my favorite of the series till that point, and I did really enjoy it, and I gave this one 4 stars. The next book that I completed was The Winner's Curse by Marie Rutkowski. So this is a YA fantasy. It's kind of like a dystopian fantasy, but I don't believe that it's set in our world, so it is like fantasy. And it follows a main character named Kestrel, who is part of a kind of race of people known as the Valorian, who have conquered this other race of people called the Haran. I believe, I don't know if that's how you say it, that's how I say it. And she, in her world, like as a Valorian, you either have to, by the age of 20, you either have to be a soldier or get married. And she doesn't want to do either of those things. I think that she's 17 at the start of this book, so she's got a couple of years to go, but her dad is a general within the army, and he really wants her to join the military because she is very military and politically minded. And that is one of my favorite things about this book. I'll go into that. I want to finish the synopsis first. And so one day she goes to the market, and she ends up kind of on a whim purchasing a slave named Aaron, who is obviously of the race that they've conquered, the Haran. So as I mentioned, one of my favorite things about this is Kestrel herself. She is such a strong female character, but not in the normal sense that you get in there. She's not like a total like going out and like kicking ass or like such a great fighter because her father is a general. which is something I really, really love, because so often in YA you get, oh, my father's been teaching me to fight, like, since I was a kid, so I'm really, really good at it. And she has been taught to fight since she was a child, but she's not good at it. Like, she's okay, like, she's passable, but she doesn't have any particular talent for it. And, you know, if anyone who did have a talent for it was fighting her, like, she would lose. But she's very strong in her mind. She's very, like, politically minded, and just, you know, can look ahead and think about strategies and just all of that type of thing. And I really, really loved that about her. I also found it very interesting that, so the Valorians have conquered the Haran in this, but the Valorians were the race that, before this kind of war happened, that were considered to be the barbarians. So it's actually the barbarians who have conquered the more civilized nation, which I found really interesting, because normally that is the other way around. I really, really liked that. There's a couple of other things I like that I probably can't touch on because it would be spoilers. I also really enjoyed the romance that happens in here, and overall I did just really, really enjoy this, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I actually DNF'd a book, and that was Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. So this was the next classic that I was trying to read, and I knew picking this up was a risk because a lot of my friends on Goodreads have not enjoyed this book, and I can see why. And so it was also really overdue to the library, and so I was trying to read it, and it was just so hard to read. And then I actually even got it out. I had a look on my Overdrive and saw that my library had it on audio, so I got the audiobook, and I tried to read a bit more of it on audio, and I just still struggled with it even on audio. All I can really say about this is that it's unforgivably boring, like just so boring. I only made it about a third of the way through, and then I just couldn't anymore, so I definitely cannot see myself reading this at any point. Next, I read The Perfect Stranger by Megan Miranda. So this is a adult thriller that follows a woman who, her life is kind of spiraling out of control, so to speak. So she has recently had to leave her job. So she's basically been forced out of her job. It was kind of like a, you know, throw yourself on your sword type of thing. She kind of has left before she's been, like, publicly fired. She's recently ended a relationship, and her life's just really not going great. She runs into this other woman who she lived with for a short period, like years and years ago, who went overseas to, like, join the Peace Corps, and she runs into her, I think, at a bar, and this girl is getting out of a abusive relationship as well, and she wants to get away, so they decide, kind of on a complete whim, to move to, like, some small town in the middle of, I can't even remember what state it's in, but it's like a small town kind of in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. And so they move to this small town, and they've been living their lives there for a few months when a woman is assaulted in the town, and the main character comes to realize that this woman who was assaulted looks a lot like her, like has a very striking resemblance to her. She then realizes that she hasn't seen her roommate in a few days. Her and her roommate have kind of different schedules. It's not unusual for her not to have seen her for a few days, but she comes to think, like, is my roommate around? She comes to realize that maybe her roommate is missing, gets involved with the police in reporting her roommate missing, and it all just kind of kicks off from there. Megan Miranda writes a really good thriller, in my opinion. She creates suspense really well and really has you gripped and turning the pages. I will say that I didn't love the resolution of the mystery kind of in this one. I enjoyed the ride more than I did the ending. I also found that the ending didn't really wrap up like the way that I would have liked to, kind of, you know, there was too many loose ends, that type of thing. But I did still really enjoy, like, kind of the ride and the journey to get to the ending. So in the end, I gave this one 3.5 stars. Next, I read The Winner's Crime by Marie Rutkoski. So this is book 2. I really, really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed this one even more than the first one. There is so much, like, mind games and stuff going on in this that I just really, really enjoyed. As I mentioned, I think Kestrel really comes into her own in this one. Like, she's really, you know, doing some mind games and stuff, and it was a really, like, interesting read. I really, as I mentioned, have been enjoying the romance. There's something that happens at the end of this book that totally destroyed me, and I found it affected me in a really personal way, and I can't talk about it without, like, spoiling what happens in this, but I just felt a real connection to this book, and I really, really loved it, and in the end I gave this one 4.5 stars. Next on audio, I listened to Do You Want to Start a Scandal by Tessa Dare. This is the 4th and final book in the Castles Ever After series. Now, I had mentioned previously that the books in this series were not connected in any way. This one is actually connected to one of the previous books. It is actually, the main guy in this is the brother of a previous main character, so there is that kind of tenuous connection, but you still don't need to read them in order if you didn't want to. Like, they are completely standalone stories. I loved this one. So again, this is narrated by Carmen Rose. This was my favorite of the 4. There's something about this one I just really, really loved. It was really humorous, like, as well, but still, like, humorous and sexy, and it was just so much fun. Like, at one point, the main character, like, gets gifted a house. That, like, there's a house and it's got a secret passage, and she has to, like, find. I just was like, this is so, like, ridiculous, but I loved it, and I really, really enjoyed it, and in the end, I gave that one 4 stars as well. Next, I read If There's No Tomorrow by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is one that I was approved for on NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley and the publishers. This is a young adult contemporary that follows a main girl who is she's in love with her best friend, her male best friend, and she's kind of coming into her senior year of high school and just kind of wants to get through her senior year of high school, you know, have her senior year and move off to college and kind of move on with her life. However, there is an event that takes place. You know from the synopsis an event is going to take place, but you don't know what it is. And then, you know, it kind of throws her plans for her senior year and that completely out of whack. One of the things that frustrated me a little bit with this book is this whole event thing taking place, because you know it's going to take place. And I thought the whole thing was going to be about trying to figure out what happened, but it's not. So you kind of know that something is going to happen, but your whole first 50% of the book is leading up to this event, and then the event happens, and then it's following on from the event. But it wasn't like one of those books where you know the event's going to happen, and then the event has happened, but you just don't know what it is, and you're trying to figure out what happened. You just know that it's going to happen, and it hasn't happened yet. And then this event happens. So that was a little bit frustrating, because I just kind of knew that something was coming, but you were just kind of trying to get there. So that was a little bit frustrating. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this. I thought this had some really great commentary in it on seeking counseling after a traumatic event. There's a lot of really, like, positive representation about that in it, in my opinion. There was also some, like, to me, the main thing that I took from this book is that it was kind of about being responsible for the decisions that you make, and like being responsible for those decisions, but at the same time not letting a mistake define the whole rest of your life, and kind of finding the balance with that, taking responsibility but not letting it ruin your life. So it was some really interesting themes in this. It is some heavy subject matter. I did have a few, like, problems with it. Like I said, I didn't like the whole lead in to the event taking so long. I also thought that some of the main characters' friends in the book were a little underdeveloped. I did like the romance, so I enjoyed it. It did have some problems, but another thing that I really didn't like is that Jennifer L. Armentrout keeps referencing that her main character is reading, like, the ACOTAR series in it, and I just found that really cheesy and over the top. Like, I did not need that in the book. Anyway, this is a complete side issue. So I did really enjoy it. It really dealt with some heavy topics, and all of my problems with it were pretty minor, and I did enjoy it a lot. So in the end, I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I completed The Winner's Kiss by Marie Rakowski. So this is the 3rd and final book in the trilogy. I really, really enjoyed this one. I obviously can't say too much about this because it is the final book in a trilogy, but I did really, really enjoy it. Rosha is probably one of my fave characters, but I really do love Kestrel, and I just overall really, really enjoyed this, and I gave this final book 4 stars. Next, I read Mad About the Boy by Helen Fielding. So I actually ended up listening to this one on audio as well because it was overdue to the library, and I saw that they had it on Overdrive, so I decided to just return it to avoid getting any more fees and listen to it on audio. It was narrated by Samantha Bond, and my least favorite part about this was probably the narration. I just really didn't like the narration of it. I can't really pinpoint what it was about it. I just didn't enjoy it. So this book is a sequel, obviously. It's the 3rd book in the Bridget Jones series. It is set quite a long way after the first 2 books. So Bridget's in, I think, her early 50s, or about 50 in this, so it is set quite a ways after that, and I really actually enjoyed this. I thought that it had some really interesting commentary in it on trying to move on with your life when your life doesn't go where you expect it to go. I also appreciated that this is kind of a romance focusing on an older main character, because we really don't get that a lot in, like, chick lit type novels. So I did enjoy that. It was definitely better than book 2. I'm not going to read the 4th book, because the 4th book, I realized, I think, you know how the Bridget Jones Baby movie came out? I think it's just a novelization of that, but it would make no sense with the timeline of like this third book. I just don't get it, and I'm not going to read that. I am going to watch that third movie, but I'm not going to read the fourth book. But I did really enjoy this in the end, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Next, I read Sisters Red by Jackson Pierce. So this is now I apologize, I had been saying that this is an adult retelling because that's what I thought it was. It turns out that this is a young adult fantasy retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. It's the first in a series. I don't think that they have connected characters, but each book is just another retelling of a different fairy tale. I didn't love this. I was actually surprised because when I had a look on Goodreads, I saw that I have quite a few friends on Goodreads who've read it, and it got pretty positive ratings. I didn't think this was very good. I found the writing really stilted. I thought the romance was way overdone. Like these characters know each other, so it's not really like an insta-lovey thing, but it was kind of like they'd never had any interest in each other, and then all of a sudden it was like, wow, we're like totally into each other. Didn't love that. Some parts of this were super unrealistic, and I don't mean in the way that like it's the everyday world with werewolves, because, you know, not necessarily believable. I mean, like, normal types of things weren't believable. Like, they go to this city at one point in the book, I think it's Atlanta, but anyway, they go to Atlanta and they've never been there before, but the main character knows, like, all these random different street names, and I was like, how do you know these street names if you've never been there before? And then, like, at another point, there's these two girls who have just literally witnessed one of their friends be completely slaughtered and torn apart by a werewolf, and they just get into a cab and leave. Like, no. And then the whole kind of climax of the book is all got to do with kind of like, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a whole timeline thing that comes into it with like, you know, it has to all happen by a certain time, and that was just complete bullshit. There's no way, like, what happened in that book happened the way that it did. I just call absolute bullshit on that. So in the end, I was really disappointed with this, and I gave it 2.5 stars. And the final book that I read in the first half of November is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. So this is my first ever Sarah J. Maas book. This is a new adult Beauty and the Beast retelling that follows the main character, Feyre, who kills a wolf. She's out hunting and she kills a wolf, and it turns out that this wolf was a fairy, and in order to repent for, like, taking this fairy's life, she has to go live with this, like, fairy lord in the Fey world. So I enjoyed this. It definitely has some problems. The romances in it are kind of problematic. Feyre makes some really questionable decisions in this that you just go, why are you doing that? I really did like the character, particularly of Lucienne, but overall it was just kind of really enjoyable. It definitely does have some problems, but I enjoyed it. I can't wait to see where this series goes based on what I've heard about this, but I did actually really enjoy this, and in the end I gave this 3.75 stars. So those were all of the books that I read in the first half of November. I'd love to chat in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts of how your guys' November reading month is going. I hope it's going as well as mine is. I'd love to chat down below. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. But that's all I've got for this video today. Bye guys!